This is Reimagining Higher Education, your go-to podcast with remarkable education leaders sharing personal stories from their experience in and around the sector, including reflection and hope for progress in the sector. With your host, Professor Judyth Sachs, former PVC Learning and Teaching at the University of Sydney, Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Provost at Macquarie University, and Special Advisor in Higher Education at KPMG, and now Chief Academic Officer at CQUniversity. Welcome.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Nick Klomp, the Vice-Chancellor and President of Central Queensland University. I have to acknowledge that I have known Nick for many years, and I recall that I was on your promotions committee to professor at Charles Sturt University, and I was on an appointments committee for you for a job at the University of Canberra. So I have watched and participated in your career with great interest over the years. But look, you've got a really interesting story to tell, and I think you're the only Vice-Chancellor who is a marathon runner. And you did disclose to me that you're not running as fast as you used to, but you're still running them. So, Nick, welcome to our Reimagining Higher Education. And so I ask everybody to bring an object that represents their journey as a learner and a leader. So can you just describe your object, please?
It's on my desk, and you might not be able to see it very well, but it's a little penguin. Actually, I suspect it's an Adelie penguin, and you shouldn't be calling things little penguins because that's an official title of one of the 17 or 18 different species of penguins. And there's a reason why I've got that, because that's where it all started, Judyth. I did my undergraduate degree at WAIT, the Western Australian Institute of Technology, which of course became Curtin University. I was just at that transition. I'd just graduated, and they sent a letter to all the graduates saying, would you rather a Curtin test aimer or a WAIT test aimer? So I ended up with both somehow. But and then I thought that perhaps I'd like to do an honours in research, a research honours in applied science, in biological sciences. And I transferred to Murdoch University to do a year, and I worked on little penguins, what we would call fairy penguins, off the West Australian coast. And boy, was it an amazing introduction to research. I had a terrific supervisor in Professor Ron Muller, and I thought it would be interesting. I guess I thought it would be a bit like an undergraduate project, but I realised that the need to be self-sustaining as a researcher, to identify the question, to construct the research, to deal with all the variables, to write it up, to think about publications. And so honours is a terrific year to really immerse you in all of that. And I guess there's two options. You come away going, I'm never going to look at that again. But I came away completely intoxicated with research. And that was the start of my academic career right there.
So what was it about penguins that excited you?
I suspect it could have been anything, Judyth, but it is interesting because from there I got a first class honours, and that helps a bit because I then attracted what was called a Commonwealth Scholarship. You could go to any Commonwealth university, and most people, when they get a Commonwealth Scholarship, would go to Oxford or Cambridge. I wanted to study with this other seabird researcher at the University of Glasgow. His name is Professor Bob Furness, so I went there and had an amazing 3 years studying in the Shetland Islands, north of Scotland. There's no penguins in the Northern Hemisphere, of course. There are only Southern Hemisphere birds. So I was working on seabirds, great skewers and puffins and fulmars and amazing birds, which really gave me that sort of international experience. Of course, as a postgrad, you get to do teaching, and I suddenly realised, whoa, I'm loving this as well. So I started thinking that I really wanted to be an academic. Funnily enough, at one point, halfway through that, Judyth, I was trying to change I think it was a second year biology laboratory bit, 1 week. I had some experience from Murdoch University, and I was going, there's a better way of teaching this. perhaps I was a little bit uppity or a little bit proud, but I'd thought of something that was better. And the process of the university committees and the professors, and for a little while there, I was thinking, oh my, the University of Glasgow at the time, Judyth, was 540 years old. It's now 575, so you know it's 35 years ago, 575 years old. They didn't have a world map for the first 200 years of their existence, but so they have a lot of serious systems that they follow and have done for a long time. So for a little while there, I was thinking, oh, wow, if this is what universities are like, how can they get anything done? But I was very fortunate in getting, before I even finished my PhD, an offer to study, to work at Charles Sturt University. Got interviewed by radio telephone from the Shetland Islands, a really remote little island, got the job, quickly knocked off my PhD in the Viva, got to Australia and discovered that, of course, that many Australian universities are quite nifty and they've got their traditions, but they're not steeped in traditions such that they can't move. So an opportunity at a new university in Charles Sturt University really was the perfect place for me. It allowed me to, if I had an idea, I had to be careful because I'd be doing it next week if I voiced it. All good ideas were welcome, and it was a terrific environment for me.
So being an international student is also an interesting experience. Being an international student in Glasgow, even though they speak English, you can't understand it.
It is true. It was almost a second language, wasn't it? That was funny. And then you go further north, right up to the Shetland Islands, and oh my goodness me, they mix in Norse words with supposedly English words along with a really deep accent. So they would say things like, I'll see you at the Muckle Grind. And I thought that was like the name of a hill or something, but Muckle means big and grind means gate. They meant I'll see you at the big gate, but it just took me a while to learn all the words. And they called my daughter at the time, and I had 1 year, and then by the time I finished my PhD, 2 little bubs. And every time she was a little bit naughty, they referred to her as a Piri Tammy Tutu. And I was thinking they were saying she's a naughty kid until I realised that they were just saying she's a little wriggling trout. So they weren't being complaining at all. They were just saying she's pretty active, sort of stuff. So it took me a little bit of a while to get used to that. And then there was other challenges as well. Different cultures, they had different ways of doing things, but that's part of the deal of being an international student, isn't it? And the university and the people were so supportive and welcoming. Yes, they must have shaken their heads going, bloody Australians, don't they know anything? Because I felt like I was a new babe in that situation, but it was terrific. I think I grew that much, just in all the things I learnt being an international student. And it held me in good stead coming back to Australia.
So given that experience, how has that shaped your response to recruiting international students? Certainly, Central Queensland have a lot of international students, and I always say the sun never sets on Central Queensland University because of your multiple campuses. But how has that also shaped your view about the lived experience of international students and the growth that they go through? But I bet the Glaswegians never asked you, how did you find the experience? And sadly, we don't ask our students, how did you find the experience? How did you grow?
Yes. Yeah, I suspect we don't ask that enough. And you can't improve things if you're not getting that genuine feedback and genuinely open to feedback. One of my life lessons, quietly, Judyth, and I think it's really important. Well, the first thing is, even for a student internationally to come to another country to study is a brave step. Even if they're really confident, even if they've got the language skills, as I mentioned, there's all the nuances, all the culture, all the different ways of doing things on top of all the learning. And the learning, for me, it was in environmental science. There was all new concepts, all new things to learn. That's what you do when you're learning at a higher level. So there's plenty of growth, but also plenty of challenges. And so that, I think the first thing we ought to be thinking about is it isn't easy for an international, it's not easy for any student at a university, but it's not easy for an international student. And so whatever supports we can pack around, the better. I'm interested in seeing some of the research that one of the things that predicts whether someone will stay at the university and continue with their studies is whether they've made a friend or not. So it isn't just the academic support, and we're very good at that here, and I hope at other universities, the academic learning centres and the support, we're good at that. Ask, if you're struggling with something, ask for help and we'll help it. But it's harder to turn up and say, I feel lonely, or I'm not even quite sure what I don't know, but I feel as though I don't know some of the rules or procedures or cultures. Could someone just befriend me and talk to me? So I suspect that those are sort of areas that we should be better at. And I think universities are waking up. I know what mine is, waking up to this space and doing what we can in that space. It is a little bit new for a lot of universities, though.
So for people who are not aware of your university and its history, can you tell us a little bit about CQU, because it's had several names?
Yes.
In its history, and it is an institution located in many places and has a footprint in many places. So what's CQU like, and what's it like to lead?
It's a complicated university, and I have a smile on my face because I'm delighted about it. It's 60 years old next year, Judyth. Its predecessor institutions was the Queensland Institute of Technology and College of Advanced Education, and was one of the Dawkins universities, what we call the Dawkins University, officially a university from 1992.
But wasn't it Capricornia?
Yes, that's right. It was Capricornia College of Advanced Education. Yes, that's right. And we still call our residences Capricornia College. So a nod to our history. So very early on, 1968 or 1969, we had online courses. So the first thing to know is it's reasonably big university. We've got about 35,000 students. But you wouldn't know it when you come to visit us at one of our campuses for a couple of reasons. One is that about half our students are largely online. They come for residential schools and block training and that sort of stuff. That's point number one. Point number two, we've got campuses everywhere. You're right, Judith, the sun never sets on our operations. I'm here in Rockhampton on Durumble lands at the moment, but we have campuses, actual campuses, not study hubs, but campuses in Cairns and Townsville and Mackay and Rocky and Emerald and Gladstone and Bundaberg, as well as campuses in the heart of Sydney, vertical campuses, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, of course, and Adelaide. So lots of activities there. We had some activities in Perth, and we've got some big collaborations, a few hundred students in Geraldton, for example, and others. So very spread out. And it is, and by the way, something else, we're also a dual sector university, which means that we're the public provider, not just an RTO, but we're the public provider of TAFE in central Queensland and lots of our regions. So that we're the only one in Queensland. There's about 6 in Australia, isn't there, Judith? But we're the only ones in Queensland. So that makes us a little bit special. But I think the importance of that is not just to have lots of campuses or something. It just makes it harder to organise. No. The importance of that is our mission. And our mission is to be the most accessible and supportive university. Now, but people have missions all the time. And so to take that seriously, you have to be saying, well, how do you improve accessibility of, and let me say tertiary education, because it's not just higher ed, we've got TAFE as well. So how do you improve that accessibility? And one of them is to be in locations where people can access it, to be great partners in the study hubs in all the other areas, to be really supportive online for the ones that really can't get to any of those other 15 or 20 locations. And then to be really supportive and understand that so many, I think it's 89% of our students are in at least one equity group. 89%. So they're regional, obviously, regional or rural, but they're First Nations folk, they're people that present with a disability, they're from low SES, and certainly so many of them first in family. So many people that recognise the opportunity of coming to university or TAFE and they can see the career opportunities and the benefits for them and their families and their communities, they'll still turn up and feel like a faker, feel like a pretender because they haven't got an older brother or sister saying, just ask for an extension. That's no problem. You can do that. So the first hurdle, and there's plenty of them when you're studying, it's hard work. The first hurdle is people might feel as though, or, maybe this wasn't for me as well. So that's the other bit. Yes, accessible in all its guises. We're proud of that. It's hard work, but we're proud of it. But then supportive. You get them in the door or they express interest in coming, then you've got to give them that support as well. So there's some challenges, but you know what? That's what makes CQUniversity so special. I'm really proud of that.
So you've got this diverse student body, school leavers, mature age students, some coming through the TAFE pathways, some, are coming through other pathways. What's the student experience like? So if I went to your university, what could I expect in terms of the experience and the support, and also the sorts of courses that I could do?
Well, we try to be as comprehensive as we can, and that's important as well. You say accessibility, but if you say, yes, we've got all sorts of courses, but if you want to do business, then you have to go to that campus, and if you want to do accounting, you have to go to that campus. So everywhere we go, if we can be fully comprehensive, we would. The funding doesn't allow that, Judyth, and that's a real pity. So we do what we can of repeating the physiotherapies and the occupational therapies and the nursing everywhere and wherever you can. Engineering, the big courses, education, big courses are on lots of campuses, but it is tough. So in answer to your question, in general, we have a medical pathway to medicine where we've got a partnership with UQ. So the students study their entire medical degree here in Rockhampton. They don't go to Brisbane once, or all their placements, all their internships, or in Bundaberg, completely in Bundaberg. We've got law, we've got all the health sciences, all the allied health sciences, the physiotherapies and chiropractics and occupational therapies and medical imagings of this world. We don't have vet science. And we don't have dentistry, but we're working on both of those because the medical program, we're now in our 4th or 5th year, has been so successful, attracting regional students, great, amazing students, but students that just simply wouldn't have had the opportunity to travel to Brisbane or wherever the next nearest place was. So we're really proud of that, and boy, we're really proud of them. They're amazing students as well, and of course, kicking goals left, right, and centre. So in a couple more years, suddenly there'll be 30 new doctors in the region. And in a few more years, there'll be 100 more, and we need every single one of them.
So one of the things that in terms of consultancy work I've been doing over the years is a sense that for some universities, they don't know who they are. They're trying to be somebody else. Who is CQU?
The question is, who are we? And when I'm in front of a politician, I remind them that in all modesty, Judyth, and I hesitate, you can hear the hesitation in my voice, I hesitate to say it, but we must be close to one of the most important universities in Australia. And it's really weird to say it that way, because it sounds like I don't think that Sydney's and Melbourne's and ANU's of this world aren't amazing universities. The research output, the tradition, the reputation, the rankings, they're incredible universities. Australia should be absolutely proud of the pedigree of our universities. But the difference is, if a university in the metro areas, for example, close tomorrow, they'll catch a bus to the next university in the next suburb. We close a campus tomorrow, 1,000 students don't go to university or don't go to TAFE. I mean, that it really is that difference. And
X number of people lose their jobs.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And some of the office, often the biggest employer in town, really highly paid jobs in town. The biggest complaint I get from the mayors of the cities we're in is, can't you open more courses? Can't you open more courses in the towns and cities we are? That when I land in other places where we don't have a campus, they're straight up there. They go, Nick, you've got a campus in Mackay. How come you haven't got one here? And why? It's because the community absolutely sees it. They know that businesses locate if they can get graduates. They know that you attract and retain young people, that families stay. It's so valuable to the community. Of course, the community is valuable to us as well. They send their students. Every industry wants to be part of the student placement and the support. So it really is important. It's just that it's thin markets, and so our universities in Australia were largely set up for school leavers. By the way, the average age of our student is 27 years of age. But universities are school leavers with an ATAR, full-time, live down the road, can go to any placement that you organise. That's what it's set up. In front of you, so you hand them the assignment, they hand it back to you. That's the policies and that's the funding. Regional universities like CQUniversity are very, very different, but still sort of trying to do this under a sort of a bit of an antiquated funding model.
So, talking about funding, but not focusing on it specifically, what are the challenges for you as a Vice-Chancellor in the most extraordinarily fluid times in which we're living, where there's uncertainty about everything? So what are the challenges that you're facing, and when you get up in the morning you think, God, this is what I've got to manage today?
Yeah. The challenges are for me to meet the mission of genuinely being that accessible and supportive. And the measure, of course, is how many graduates I produce in those areas. I don't need to produce any more graduates in the city specifically. That's largely covered. But I do need to attract and retain more people from the less represented groups, the regions, the low SES, the First Nations, and all the other equity groups. I need to attract them, support them, and therefore retain them. That's my challenge. And it starts even at attraction, because there isn't necessarily anyone saying you ought to think about TAFE or uni in their family or even in their school. And certainly not necessarily in their community. So then someone has to be big enough and bold enough and brave enough to say, I'm thinking about this and I might make some inquiries. And then they typically might need extra support. They might not need much academic support, Judyth. If they're given the same opportunities, they're bound to have achieved the same thing as a school leaver or an adult learner in any part of the country. But they probably haven't been exposed to those same opportunities. So at least they'll need cultural support, if not other support. Now, you're not really in a university funded for that. And particularly given that probably half our students are part-time. And so you can't say, oh, you're a part-time student, so only going to give you half the support. No, actually, they're a whole person, and that whole person has come to us and said, look, I really like a career change. I really like to start a career. I don't know how this works. Can you help me through? And my proudest moments are when people walk across the stage and they're doffing their hat at graduation, Judyth, and if you'd met them in first year, you wouldn't have put money on them. But of course, they put in the effort. If we can put in enough effort to support them, of course they're going to graduate. And then we know from all the numbers, not only are they going to take their place and have an amazing career and opportunities and career choices, but their kids are more likely to go to uni, and their kids are. So, you're really making a difference here. So what are my challenges? My challenges are to do more of that. That's something that I'm really proud of. I'll go to my deathbed thinking, well, maybe I've influenced the lives of thousands of people with getting the policies right and the support right. It's pretty cool. It's a bit of responsibility, but it is pretty cool, and I'm really proud of that.
We all too often hear critics in the community saying students are left with a huge HECS debt, and for many of them, they won't get jobs. How do you counter that sort of the naysayers about the social benefit that universities provide to communities? And how do you counter that sort of ultra right conservative discussion about don't bother?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things there. The first thing is that we've got to make sure that we give the return on investment. We are really clear about the return on investment. And it is fair enough for people to be doing their sums and saying, I'm going to get this sort of debt. How does this pay off over my lifetime or over my working career or that sort of stuff? I think people are pretty smart and they're bound to do those sums. It doesn't help if they're given misinformation about that. And so the idea of don't bother is fine until all the jobs are requiring skills. Maybe vocational schools, all our vet sector, nearly 10,000 of our students are vet students, and boy, do they walk into jobs. They all need them. We've got one of the highest employment rates of higher ed as well. So are we confident that we're producing the graduates that industry, communities, organisations, government need? Yeah, we're pretty confident about that. And do we know that it gives them a far better, not just lifetime earning capacity, but also more career choice, having studied? Yes, we've got to give that message. That's the first thing. But the second thing is the debt is scary, and it's less scary for richer people. It's more scary for low socioeconomic, poorer people, or from backgrounds where they don't really know the system, and they're told you go to uni, but you're low $30,000 or $20,000. That's really scary. That sort of bill for many of our typical students and their families. And yet, I'm happy to tell you, a large organisation just here in Rockhampton has just approached us and said, can we share some of your accountants? Because we just can't get enough accountants. So we produce a few graduates, but the cost of the accounting degree has skyrocketed since JRG, Job Ready Graduate legislation. And so many people are making a decision going, that's the sort of thing I'd love to do. I'd love to run a business or be part of a business, and I love the numbers. It's the sort of thing I'd love to do. But gee, that price really scares me. So I am concerned that Australia as a whole doesn't quite balance the benefit it gets from having a highly skilled workforce. Because there is big benefit. And I know there's a balance between what the students should pay and what the government, the nation should support. There is a balance there. I don't know whether we've got the balance right, Judyth.
So continuing on the student line, if there was one thing that you could do to support students to be successful, because from what you're telling me, you're a university that actually has students front and centre, and you want them to be successful. So if there was one thing or one piece of advice you could give to government, what would they be?
To the students, Judyth, I would say stick with it. Because within the first few weeks, there'll be a hurdle. An assignment will be due and you won't know really what's required. Or you'll miss a deadline and you'll think, oh, no. Stick with it and ask for help. No kidding. We are so worried. We were so saddened when we realised someone's dropped out quietly and we find out that it's for reasons that we could have done something about. There's all sorts of other reasons why people say, hey, it's not the right time. I've got family commitments. I've got regional commitments. And it's much, much harder. Even finding out that you got a placement and it could be 1,000 kilometres away, but still in the same state. It's just so different for a regional student than for a metropolitan student, and we get that, but we can help. So my advice to the students is please yell out, because there are people standing by really trying to help, and we've seen all those problems and many more before. So don't underestimate what we can do to help. And it's in our interest to support you, to get you through. So let us support you along that other way. To government, I would say they've got a job lot to do, because they keep on talking about getting greater representation, to get the Australian skilled workforce of 80% of tertiary educated vet or higher ed. They're not going to do it by throwing more money, privilege onto privilege in the metropolitan areas. They're not going to do that. They're going to have to be looking at these underrepresented groups, and they've got a job lot to do to enhance the aspiration. We can do lots. We can visit schools. We can visit communities. We can display our wares and really be welcoming. But there's work to be done right at the very start with all the schools, with the teachers, perhaps with communities. And it might take a generation of building that aspiration. We stand ready and we'll be supportive. But we can't drag people in. They have to be thinking that that's a possibility. Now, it doesn't help when governments of all persuasion have a go at universities. Oh, what's the universities doing? What about gender-based violence? It's absolutely terrible, no doubt about it. But you're safer on campus than you are in the community. They don't say that bit. That yes, do we have something to do? Yes, but so is society. Does that make it less for me? No, I've got to fix it. But don't be suggesting that universities aren't safe, amazing, welcoming places, because they largely are. And then the other thing that doesn't help when people talk down universities is they talk about the social license. And you just touched on that, Judyth. Have universities lost their way? They've lost their social license. And that might be true in some circumstances where the society, the community doesn't feel necessarily connected to their university. Oh my goodness me. It couldn't be more different in the regions. Everybody knows us, every community, everyone, their biggest complaint is that we don't open another campus in their town. And that connection is absolutely fundamental. So every time I hear someone saying, now universities ought to do this, I stop them and say, which universities? You've got to say which universities, because otherwise you put everybody in the same lot. And you come to speak to any of our communities throughout regional Australia, and they're not talking like that. They love the fact that they have a university in their backyard.
So I've got two more questions. The response to AI in the past 3 years has been, that trajectory has been the moral panic. The sky's going to fall in. It'll be the death of universities. You can't trust students. They'll cheat. The next iteration is, let's actually use it so that, in fact, it's fundamental to learning. But we need to put in some scaffolding skills so that students optimize their learning through AI and with AI. So what do you think is the next iteration of AI in higher education?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is it's here to stay. I mean, but boy, have I been through this. So I started out making mail packages for our distance education students. And we'd send out the mail packages. By the way, the students loved getting them, and there'd often be a textbook with them and all the notes curated and that sort of stuff. And they'd send back assignments. And then we went to CDs. And hang on a second, not everyone's got a CD player. You can't just jump into that technology. And I look back at it now and smile. But at the time I was going, yeah, we've got to be equitable here. So I better keep sending the mail packages, even though, people with CDs might be able to, and there was VHS in between there, and it just got, and every time there was a change, there was at least some people rocking in a corner saying, oh, we'll all be doomed. And then we got the internet in the mid-90s. We were early adopters at Charles Sturt University, and people were so scared. You could get all this information online. Where does that leave the academic? They'll go learn themselves, Judyth. We can't have that. So people were worried about that, and they're worried their jobs. All those people have still got jobs. They probably retired, but they've also got jobs. And we got smarter in how we could access the online information and curate it for them and that sort of. Do you remember Y2K bug? And everyone was running around putting stickers on computers. Oh, I'm Y2K compliant. So I'm beyond the scaring. Okay, I'm not scared of AI. I just think it is amazing technology. Are there bugs? Yes. Just like when the internet became on your phone and suddenly people were accessing inappropriate information and picking on each other at school, cyberbullying. Yeah, there's downsides to it and amazing upsides, and we've got to be smart enough to control that. I see AI as the next version of that. So never at this university did we say we're going to stop people using AI, although some universities said that. We've got to stop them using it. We didn't. We said, are you kidding? It's got to be part of their learning, and we can't produce a graduate that doesn't know how to use AI in a really clever way, really inventive way. So we're getting pretty good at that. We're getting pretty good at thinking about how we maintain the integrity of knowing that the student has met their study requirements, and we can talk about that in a moment if you like. But meanwhile, there's me, and there's all the staff that work in a university. We can't just say, yes, we'll produce really good graduates that know how to use AI appropriately. We've got to be learning ourselves. And just this morning I had a meeting and someone said, oh, I just got AI to bring up this chart. I'm going, that's an amazing chart. And that another use of AI that I hadn't thought about, pulling together data from a few different locations. So I've got plenty to learn. We've all got plenty to learn. Will it make our jobs more efficient? Yes. Perhaps more responsive to students? Yes. Do we need to be careful about accessing information, about making student confidential files available to inappropriate things, to ensure that the students are using it and we've crafted their learning so that they can use it as just another friend to help them learn? Absolutely. But ways to identify problems and ways to ensure that the student has still achieved that learning. Yeah, they're the challenges. Are we up for it? Of course we are. Just like every other new technology, it comes with such huge benefits, and there's some risks and some problems that we need to solve along the way.
So if we were to have our conversation in 3 to 5 years, so what sort of things do you think we'd be talking about then?
Yeah. Well, I think the fear of AI might have gone. By the way, another thing that AI has done has stopped the contract cheating, and that was a bit of a problem at different universities where students would pay to get an assignment done. You're dancing with the devil, because not only were they likely to get caught and in trouble from the university, but suddenly that person, whoever did their assignment for them, can blackmail them. And I, in previous universities, got letters from the contract cheaters saying, George, we did this assignment for George Smith. You should fail him because he didn't pay us. So you got to. Can you see? You'd be caught for a lifetime if you contract cheat, because they can always come back. They've got your details. So I was always imploring the students, for goodness sake, do not go down that road, folks. Ask for help. Don't go down the road if you're struggling with an assignment. So AI has taken that away, but presented it with a new problem. What are we saying in 5 years, Judyth? I think students will want more and more flexibility. That companies will want more and more short, sharp upskilling, because and we get this now, engineers, really highly qualified engineers for years and years, the companies and the individuals are coming back to us going, yes, but I need instrumentation. Yes, but I need AI. I don't need a whole new degree, but boy, do I need some top-ups. And I suspect, looking down the road, I'll need another 3 top-ups, Nick. Can you please create these short courses, these top-ups, and give me that recognition in case I want to turn it into a master's, and that sort of stuff. So all of those, we call them short courses, micro-credentials. We've got to get our act together in recognising that properly, and make it stackable and make it really flexible. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the school leavers, the generations coming, not necessarily the mature learners, but the school leavers more and more will want it personalised. They'll want it about them, and they'll want assignments that are important to them so they can get into it. And a good example is my son, and I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning it. My son did our Masters, CQUniversity MBA. And it was a neat way for me to check out how our courses are going, Judyth. So it's a bit like secret shopping, but through your son. Anyway, he graduated a year or so ago. It was what we call hyper flexible. He's since had a bub. He got a new relationship, baby girl Matilda, our granddaughter, who's now 4, and changed jobs a couple of times. So he wanted to be able to do the assignments when he needed to, and sometimes he'd take a week off and knock off 3 assignments, but then he'd go quiet for a few months. So that hyper flexibility is what our MBA offered. But it's another thing. He was allowed to design his assignments. It was different topics on world economics or technologies or typical MBA, but he could design it around what he was doing at work. And that was, his bosses loved it, because they said, I need a report next week by such and such. And they'd get this report with a lit review and they would think, wow, he's amazing. Of course, it was his assignment as well. So being able to tailor it, not all the time, but a lot of the time, with what was important for him at the time, but still relevant for the learning outcomes and then that flexibility. It was a really good lesson for me is it's not everyone. Some school leavers just want the structure and the timelines and the face-to-face classes, of course. But a lot of people just need that, at different parts of their life need something different. I suspect we'll be seeing a lot more of that in the few years, and at least from our university, because that's what we're working on at the moment, Judyth.
My last question, Nick, is really left field. What are you reading at the moment?
I just finished, so I try to read novels. And it used to be that I'd knock off, 20 every couple of weeks. I'd knock off a novel, but I tracked them on an Excel spreadsheet for 30 years. It's just completely mad, yeah, just a thing to do. But I'm often interested. I remember that book and that book, and now I'm down to about 12 books a year. So it's taken me 4 weeks to get through a book, and that's because by the time I get to it at the end of the night, I'm falling asleep in the pages. So I just finished reading My Friends by Frederick Blackman, Blakman, My Friends. He's written a number of novels, My Friends, and gee, it's good. But I suspect that I found it particularly endearing because it sort of spoke to me about my old school friends that I still have and university friends. So perhaps it just sort of spoke to me a little bit. But I loved that book. It was a terrific read. And now I'm looking around for something else. I'm scared to take on a big novel, just because I know it's going to take me weeks and weeks and weeks to get through it because, like you, I'm surrounded by so much reading. All I do pretty well all day is reading and catching up and going through reports. So I need just sort of short, sharp novels mostly, which is a pity because you're missing some of the bestsellers as well. So that's what I'm reading now, and I'm up for my next book this week.
So, Nick, are you going for a run this afternoon?
Yes. No, this morning. I ran this morning. I run most mornings. I still, it's funny, you do that, Judyth, and it would be advice to up and coming leaders. You still got to look after yourself. And so I just, yes, it's a 5 o'clock start, but 5 a.m. start. But for me, if I can keep on running, it just keeps me sort of fit enough, if you like, but maybe just centered enough or something. It gives me an opportunity to think about different things. Yeah, I still do a marathon every year, and I tell you why. It's because I don't want to embarrass the family, so I don't want to be completely terrible at it. So it forces me to do a bit of training because, hang on, it's coming up in a couple of months. I better get out there. And so it keeps me running if I've committed myself to a marathon. For example, I did the Sydney Marathon just passed in September, and there was about 35,000, and I came about 20,000th there. So I didn't win, Judyth. I just can't understand
it. Nick, this conversation has been an absolute delight, and I certainly see the man that I knew probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, in the man that is in front of me leading a most complex university. So thank you for giving me the time, and thank you for the work you're doing for your communities, but also for the students in them.
Thanks, Judyth. Delighted to catch up with you again.
You have been listening to Studiosity's podcast, Reimagining Higher Education, candid conversations within higher education, sharing stories of leadership, change, and best practice in teaching and learning. Visit studiosity.com.